thou shalt not overreact when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into Combine reactions. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined once again by Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr. We're doing really well tonight. We got both of them, but as you may have noticed, we're also streaming on a Sunday night for that reason, so that we could get both of them. So we're excited to have both guys, or the whole crew, back together, and we're excited to talk about the Combine, the NFL Combine, these rookies, our reactions to what actually turned out to be a pretty exciting Combine. Although I was a little disappointed that a lot of players didn't run and things like that, but the players that did pretty well for the most part. And now we have reactions, and obviously overreactions are going to come with that as well on the timeline. So we're going to go over some of the reactions, some of the overreactions, and just see, hey, is there a reason for it? Are we moving anyone up? Are we moving anyone down from the Combine? All that kind of good stuff. Everyone says don't double count it. That's not how Beth works, so we're definitely not going to be doing that. At least that's not how I'm going to be doing it tonight. We'll see if Aaron and Andy do double counting thing tonight. But first, let's check in with the boys. Aaron, we missed you last week. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. The Combine, I always have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. Love watching it every year. Hate some of the overreactions at times, and or just the conclusions that people make from this. You know, people who are testing and running really fast in tights. It's like, does that translate over to the field? A lot of times, no. And some of the drills are not just very specific for it. Like, I go back, one of my old college buddies, shout out Luke Bruss. He and I always joke about like DK Metcalf 3-cone time and you know how he's going to be trash. Everybody, you know, very much was like, this guy can't move. He's not an NFL receiver. And you know, there's just more to these players than sometimes what these drills show. But there are some things we can glean from it. Obviously, we need to know the athleticism of the player. It drives draft capital. It drives some of the expectations that we can have, especially if there's some maybe missing pieces to the profile, or maybe they already had a stellar profile and this is just the cherry on top. So there's value from looking at the NFL Combine results, no doubt, and can't wait to get into that here.
Absolutely. Andy, were you checking out the Combine, or were you just looking for my updates as I was sending them over?
I tuned in for the 40-yard dash for the running backs, but largely, no, I was not watching it this year. And I'll just echo what Aaron was just saying. You know, we can't really take too much from what we gather this weekend. At the end of the day, like, these are all college athletes. You know, some of them might be a tenth of a second faster in a 40-yard dash. But for me, production is always a king. The one thing that this Combine does, it has an effect on what Aaron was saying, draft capital. There are teams out there who will, especially, you know, I think about Al Davis's Raiders, you know, 20 years ago. He would always draft the fastest guy at the Combine. You know, there's still NFL GMs and scouts out there who will say, like, let's get this super athlete on our team just because he's so athletic. We can fix him, essentially. So you do have to put that into your, I guess, models or evaluations. Say, like, okay, this guy just ran an absurd 40 time. He's probably going to get drafted 3 rounds earlier than he should have. And that draft capital, whether or not we like it or not, does matter, because guys that get drafted in the 3rd round are going to get more opportunities than somebody drafted in the 7th round. And opportunity in fantasy is king, because if you're on the field, you're scoring points. So you do have to, you know, take these super, you know, effective or really high-end Combine performances to heart in some regards, because it does inevitably result in higher draft capital, and that means more likelihood of opportunity. Oh, John, you're muted. Oof, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break it to you.
The funny thing is, I was unmuted the whole time. I think I muted myself to start out. So it's, unfortunately, the we only saw 10 of the 22 running backs that were at the combine even run a 40. We only saw 30 of the 50 wide receivers that were there run a 40. I think about half of the QBs did anything, if anything. So it's, unfortunately, we don't have. Now, we will get pro day times for at least some of these players, maybe not all of them. The only thing we saw Jordan Tyson do, I believe, is weigh in and do the bench press, and he was one away from breaking the bench press record. Although people were giving him crap for his form, I'm like, dude's 200 pounds, throwing up 225 pounds 26 times. Like let's give him a little bit of leeway, but it's, um, but yeah, so I was a little disappointed that we didn't see everyone run. I mean, it seems like every year we're getting less and less that are actually running at the combine, to the point where I know people have talked about in the past, but maybe eventually we won't even have a combine anymore. Or it seems like it's for like the lesser known players. It's like all the stars are starting to kind of do their own thing, do their pro days, so they can control the narrative and that kind of thing. But there was one player, at least one running back in particular, that we had our eyes on, and he basically did everything, which you got to give him props for. One of the few running backs that did every single exercise out there, and that was Emmett Johnson. Unfortunately for Emmett Johnson, he did every single exercise poorly, so I don't really know why he did them. But he did do it. I mean, he was the only running back to run a three cone. And yet it was, I believe when I saw it, it was a ninth percentile three cone score or something around there. It was very low, whatever it ended up being, 7.32 for a 202-pound running back. Probably not the three cone score you're looking for. Obviously, we've been. I don't want to say haters because we don't. We try definitely not to hate any player or besides Garrett Nussmeyer, but we definitely have not been big fans of Emmett Johnson. What is this doing? Are we at this point with Emmett Johnson? Are we just saying, hey, we kind of knew the athleticism wasn't there, nothing's really changing for us, or are you saying, hey, like we expected this, but this might have actually been worse than we thought?
Yeah, I was a little bit hopeful that Emmett Johnson would weigh in at more than 202 pounds. And if he was going to be that weight, that he'd be more explosive in some of the testing. Doesn't have to be 40 time because we know that he's not that fast, right? Just from watching him. But yeah, no, I was not impressed. I mean, I wasn't coming into this again thinking he was going to blow anybody away at the combine. And so some of that was confirmed. So I'm not just going to say like, okay, this sinks him. I had him super high and now he's super low. Like, I did not expect him to be a high end athlete, and that's the biggest limitation with his profile. So, unfortunately, Emmett Johnson, yeah, he runs really tough. He's capable enough as a receiver, all that, but he just does not have the burst out there. Just not a special athlete, and at the NFL level, like that's what it takes. Unless you're getting insane amounts of volume to be like a long term difference maker at the running back position. You need some juice, and he did not show that. He was at 40-yard dash. He was what, a 4.56. I thought I
Yeah.
saw a 4.60, but again, not the worst time ever. But again, he's 202 pounds, and he's
Yeah.
supposed to be more of like a power back. That's tough.
Yeah, I actually had him. So I always do projected weight adjusted speed score, and I had him projected to run a 4.52, and he ran a 4.56. So like things did not drastically change for him. I think I had him projected at 200 pounds even, and he came at 202. So like his BMI didn't change much. So that's where I'm saying like with Beth, it doesn't really change all that much unless you have some substantially different, thing. Like we can obviously get into other positions, other players, but like Kenyon Sadiq, it's not that I didn't think he was athletic. I don't know that I didn't have him projected to be that athletic, and so like he actually did make a pretty substantial change in Beth. Now that's not me saying like, oh my god, all of a sudden he's the 105 for me or something like that. Let's calm down with the overreactions. He moved up one spot for me. Kenyon Sadiq did with that movement. Whenever you get in above 120 height adjusted speed score, I've always made a manual adjustment for any player that's done that. It just seems like once you get to that, it's like, hey, you're a special kind of athletic, so let's go ahead and give you another boost. So I gave Kenyon Sadiq that extra boost. It moved him up one spot, but he's still not in my first round of rookie picks. So it's moving him up one spot, but I'm still saying like this is a player that needs time. And and I went and looked at it just to see because it's like I don't get into overly into like RAS score or anything like that. In fact, if you look, a lot of times RAS score is actually proven to not be that predictive or anything like that as far as like if a player is going to be great or not. It can actually be worse sometimes than if you were just a normal thing, but a normal athlete. But with Sadiq, I wanted to look like some of these other players that he's being comped to or being, his 40 times were around, his athleticism is around. Like, how did those players look? And one of the players that he comps to the most with just like the speed score and his size and everything is Vernon Davis. And I mean, Vernon Davis had a great 14-year career in the NFL, but it took about 4 years for him to do anything. I think he had like 200 yards receiving in his rookie year. It took him multiple years before he did anything, and I don't even think he broke 1,000 yards receiving until like his fifth or sixth year. And so I could easily see that Kenyon Sadiq is not even 21 years old yet. He's a athletic freak. This is not me saying that Kenyon Sadiq is is terrible, going to be terrible, is going to be a bust. But I think it's going to take years. And I mean, it's just, do you want to invest a top end pick or, a first 106, 105, whatever into a guy that's going to take possibly 4 years before he's really, producing for you a la like a Kyle Pitts or somebody like that.
Yeah, it really wasn't until recently that we started seeing like tight ends come into the NFL and immediately produce. It was kind of like an unspoken thing, like, oh, tight ends take 3 or 4 years to get to where they need to be. And then we got, you know, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride and Sam Laporta all come in and immediately do something. So, but I'm with you. I think Sadiq kind of, if you look at, his metrics for market share, yards per team pass attempt, all that stuff, um, he's like right on line with like Eli Stowers, but Eli Stowers played 2 additional years and then got to where he's at. And I don't think that Sadiq would. I think that if Sadiq continued to play in college, he would follow a similar trend. Um, but yeah, I will always maintain that right now he's being overrated. I think that he needs to improve his efficiency in the passing game. Um, some of that stuff might not have been his fault, but as a receiver, he just hasn't gotten there yet, and maybe he can in the NFL. But I feel like the league has kind of shifted in a sense to where teams aren't necessarily as patient as they once were either. If you're spending a first round draft pick on a guy, you probably want him to be an immediate impact, obviously. So it we have to wait and see, obviously, who's gonna take him if he goes in the first or not. It seems like at this point it probably is going to be a certainty that he's a first round pick just based on what we saw him do in the combine. So and as far as Emmett Johnson, I feel like this is it's a two-edged sword, three-edged sword. I don't know, but we don't like these guys, and then they don't test well, and then everyone else is down on them. Whereas sometimes we'll like a guy like Mike Washington, and he tests really well, and now everyone's like, oh, maybe Mike Washington's pretty good, and then they boost him up the rankings a little bit. Um, at the same time, you can have guys that you really like who don't test very well at all, and maybe people move them down based on this athleticism. But you and I or anyone else can say like, okay, well, the athleticism in Indianapolis with your underwear on isn't as important as what you can do in a game. So that's what I kind of take away from the combine. I think too is just Other people are going to move a lot more, and sometimes that's to my benefit, and other times it's a disservice to me because guys that I like are moving up people's rankings, and I might not have as good of a chance as getting them.
Yeah, no, well said with that. That I will say, so I listened to your guys' podcast episode because I was not on the podcast last week, and you guys went in depth about the running back class, and I enjoyed that podcast. Even though the combine has now passed, we have all that data. I still think it's a good listen. Just breaking down the class and some of the limitations, especially just taking the athleticism out of it that we saw at the combine. And the Emmett Johnson thing is there's actually a couple of interesting metrics because that was something that was said is that there's no good metrics when looking at Emmett Johnson. And JJ Zacharyson with his model, he's identified, trends with, NFL bell cows and studs. And apparently Emmett Johnson met three of his most important things in his app model. But again, I don't know that that's just going to propel him with that athleticism concerns with some of those things into being a big time playmaker. So, but I guess there are a few things there with Emmett Johnson where, I mean, I guess you can say there's a few positives. And then also looking at some recent running backs at the NFL level, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, both of which were significantly worse with their RAS scores compared to Emmett Johnson as well. Now, those guys had different production profiles and or situations, so I don't think that Emmett Johnson exactly profiles to them. We have to understand that Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, is similar or worse 40 times in some of the other testing that they saw compared to Emmett Johnson. So there is a sliver of hope. He finds the right situation somewhere. Somehow he gets some touches and it maintains some relevance for a while. But like you guys have said, the listeners should go back and listen to last week's episode if they want to hear all those long list of concerns within the production profile of an Emmett Johnson. I hate to keep talking, but I mean, you mentioned Kenyon Sadiq, and you guys know how I've been high on Kenyon Sadiq coming into the season, and I would say that almost a tale of two seasons where his production kind of waned as he went down further along into the season. It didn't seem to like build up and get better and better and better. But when you look at it with Kenyon Sadiq, he crushed the combine, like you guys said. He measured in bigger than expected. So I think from the combine, I have three clear winners. Mike Washington, running back, Arkansas. Eli Stowers, tight end, Vanderbilt. And then Kenyon Sadiq, absolutely out of Oregon. Because at the tight end position, you want to be at least 6'3". Like nowadays, that's just really a must. And he measured in there. You got to be 240 plus pounds. He hit that. He had the best combine 40 time ever for a tight end. He set the record for best vertical jump of all time at the combine until Stowers also broke that the same day. So both those guys jumped out of the gym, and then the third best combine broad jump of all time for Kenyon Sadiq. So the guy is explosive, fast, and an early declare. So I love that you guys already touched on the fact that like we haven't seen it yet, but there's certainly a bright future. There's a possibility that he truly puts it all together because you'll look at what do guys do in their first 3 years typically, or at least in some significantly influential players at the tight end position. What did they do their first 3 years? I looked at this. Tyler Warren, 184 yards in his college career, first 3 years. Trey McBride, 979. Mark Andrews, 807. George Kittle, 420 yards. Travis Kelce, 875, and Zach Ertz, 536. You know how much Sadiq had? He had 892. So surpassing most of those guys. Now, I understand that that's not percentages, right? Receiving yards percentage, yards per team pass attempt, yards per route run. But just knowing from a volume standpoint, like he was earning targets at the second highest rate on the team last year at the tight end position. And he was the clear leader on the Oregon team in touchdowns. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of positive things. He was also competing with potentially next draft's tight end one, Jamari Johnson, who was more efficient, but yet could not. He had 19 less receptions than Sadiq. So obviously they wanted to get the ball into Sadiq's hands. Unfortunately, there's so many of those were like behind the line of scrimmage. It's impossible to look like a super efficient down the field type of threat when your offense is just so set on that. But that's a Dante Moore issue as well. It's like an offensive scheme thing. And anybody who listens to us knows Dante Moore is a flawed quarterback. He's got a lot of work to do. So In a lack of production, I will say one more thing. Fourth year tight end, Terrence Ferguson, tight end for Oregon, was also blocking Sadiq in 2023 and 2024. So that kind of nuked some of that early career production as well. So if we would have seen a fourth, fifth year out of Sadiq, which is more typical for tight ends traditionally, we'd see some positive things. So that's all to say. This guy's breaking records as an athlete. I'm very excited for him with very likely first round draft capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, when we've had a whole back and forth about Sadiq over the past year, really, and it's been a fun one. We've both been right, we've both been wrong on certain parts. Uh, I will say I will give Sadiq a little credit. When I first started looking at his overall production and everything, I'm like, all right, this guy is just not good. His market share is not good. He ended the year worse than he started. Like the things you don't want to see. If anything, you want to see progression, not regression, like that kind of thing. But then I really started Ryan McDowell posted the youngest players in the 2026 draft, and there's Sadiq. He's 20.8 years old, and it really started hitting like home. Like, yeah, he is, but he's not done. He's not done learning. He's not done growing. He's not done whatever. Obviously, he has the athleticism. So now I'm kind of stuck in this where like I get it. I see the vision that Aaron sees, but I also see a player that needs to grow and isn't ready yet. And so, I'm already convinced myself, at this point, like I will end up with zero Sadiq shares because someone's always going to take him before me. So it's almost to the point where it's not I will never draft this player. Like I would absolutely draft Sadiq at the right moment. He's never going to make it to that moment is the problem. And so it's almost like a player like I don't even think about anymore because I don't need to. People since the combine, the overreactions we're talking about, we're already seeing certain people putting him at 105, putting him ahead of Jordan Tyson, putting him ahead of whoever that they didn't like. If they didn't like Carnell Tate's 40 time, okay, now Kenyon Sadiq goes ahead of Carnell Tate, and someone is going to take him at 105. Like I'm convinced of that at this point in your drafts, especially if it's tight end premium. Someone's I've made the joke of the worst pick in your draft is always going to be the question before this is super flex, right? This is tight end premium, right? That's going to be that person, and then they're going to take Kenyon Sadiq at 105, and then they're going to sit there for 3 years and he's going to do nothing, and then finally in the fourth year everything's going to hit, and you're going to be like, oh my god, this player's amazing, he's 23 years old and he's a stud. So I have come around to appreciating Kenyon Sadiq more, but unfortunately everyone else has lost their damn minds.
Yeah, I think that's the story at the end of the day. Like he still has a lot of work to do, and it could be 3 or 4 years, honestly, before we see like true tight end one numbers. I just don't see it in the first season. That's something a guy like Stowers can provide for you: immediate impact, immediate production, because he is older. He has been playing a long time. But that's kind of like what you want with the tight end position. I don't know what it is about tight ends. It just seems like they take longer to develop than some of these other positions.
Well, it's nice to have a guy like Stowers who already is, like you said, experienced, maybe a little bit better frame, and he tested amazing. But I will say with him, there's always that concern of like, can he actually get on the field at the NFL level? Like, does a team trust him to block? And if they just don't trust him going out there and doing that simple role, which is just essential for a tight end to be able to do at least some of, that's a concern. And I'm not saying that he truly cannot block. I have not watched him enough. I haven't even dug. This is just secondhand concern that I've heard about him. But that is something that you hear from scouts, you hear from people who have thoroughly evaluated him. And, I'm not going to ever completely write off a guy like that, especially with some of the aspects of intriguing production for Stowers and also the insane athleticism that he showed too. So those are some of the most important things: draft capital, athleticism, and then hitting some basic thresholds from a production standpoint is just a nice, very nice bonus. So he's got a lot going for him. He just, I guess, a little bit of concern. is he going to be like Elijah Arroyo, where they just don't really want to get him on the field because of blocking concerns? I know there's more than just that with Arroyo, like injury history, but again, that's an important point that we have to consider with Stowers.
Yeah, and Stowers didn't change. He did not move a single spot for me after adjusting, and I mean it was the same thing. I gave him the same adjustment that I gave Sadiq, and he is in the same exact spot he was in before. So nothing has changed for me in that regard. Unfortunately, I was kind of with like Andy's always been in on Stowers, like that was his guy from day one. I was getting to the point where I was thinking like I'm not going to ever end up with Sadiq, but maybe I'll end up with some Stowers. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore either. I think someone's always going to overdraft him or draft him ahead of where I feel comfortable taking him. Unfortunately, I'm still going to be looking for my Justin Jolie's and players like that in like the later rounds, and I'm just going to get my tight ends that way because I mean there's I won't go as far as saying like this is a great tight end class. I don't truly believe that, but there is a lot of depth, whether you want to call it a good thing or a bad thing. And so like I'd much rather take a proven athlete like a Justin Jolie in like the fourth round than take Kenyon Sadiq at 105 or take or Eli Stowers at 108 or whatever it might be. I'll take Justin Jolie and just hope for the best. But yeah, why don't we get into the running backs really quick? We kind of went off on a little tight end tangent there, which is fine because they showed out that they had some an exciting day, so definitely had to give them their love. But why don't we get into the running backs because Emmett Johnson wasn't the only disappointment here. Jadarian Price is a player that we've been pretty excited about. Aaron said, go back and listen to last week's pod if you haven't already. I said my clear cut RB2 in the class. Andy, I believe, fully agreed with that. I don't think there was any, or no, maybe you had Coleman in the same tier. No, okay. So
No.
yeah, Jadarian Price right there, RB2. Now here's the thing. I mentioned this on the last pod. I hate being repetitive, but if anyone didn't listen to that one or whatever, with Beth, running back draft capital matters more than any other position. Like wide receiver draft capital does not matter that much. QB, tight end does not matter that much. It is a part. Is it a fact? Excuse me. It is a factor. But running back draft capital really does matter because it shows the opportunity that they're going to get, like Andy was talking about before. Running back getting seventh round draft capital, unfortunately, they're just not going to get that opportunity most of the time. So I nothing has changed for me. Um, Emmett Johnson fell to RB7. He was my RB5. He fell to RB7. That was the only change that I had in the top seven guys. Even with Mike Washington's 40 time, he moved up. He actually moved up a tier, but he did not move up a rank. So like that was a nice thing to see. He moved up into a nice tier for me, but now he's in that tier with Jonah Coleman and Jadarian Price. Nothing else has changed. But the reason for that is the projected draft capital hasn't had a chance to change yet. I think when it's all said and done, Jadarian Price might drop a little bit in projected or actual draft capital when it's all said and done. Jonah Coleman is probably going to drop a little bit because he did not do anything at the combine, and he came in as a literal bowling ball at 5'8" even, not 5'8" in a tenth or whatever, 5'8" even, 220 pounds, doesn't run, has a bad, big time run rate and all that kind of stuff. That scares the crap out of me. I mean, he literally is a bowling ball at that point. I feel like he might drop a little bit, and I feel like Mike Washington Jr. might gain some draft capital here. He was projected to be 110 overall. I could easily see him getting into the 80s, 70s, possibly even the 60s of this draft with that 40 time. And now we're talking about him being my RB2 in the class. So it has not happened yet. I can't say for sure what will or won't happen or anything like that. But I could definitely see those changes happening because of the combine, but not necessarily that I'm changing anything or doing anything in Beth. It's just that the NFL is saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and draft this guy better than we were before.
Yeah, and I will say that Mike Washington, hey, I appreciate everything that he did from a combine standpoint because he literally is the best combine tester, I think, of all time now with a perfect RAS score of 10. So I think that's kind of insane. And he's also just a grown man out there. Like, I mean, he's been in college 5 years, and somehow his first 4 years, he couldn't even lock down a lead role at the G5 level. Like, it was bad. Like, Ron Cook was outproducing him at Buffalo. Guess what? Seth McGowan, who is also in this class as a running back, we don't even know who Seth McGowan is, like the average fantasy drafter. Seth McGowan was outproducing him at New Mexico State in his 4th year. Like, what is Mike Washington doing? But then he comes to Arkansas and he goes off this year. He has a pretty good season. I do think he got boosted from Taylon Green being a dual threat quarterback there at Arkansas this season. Like, Taylon Green, he actually had a monumental combine as well. I'm not going to call him a winner because I don't think he's an NFL quarterback, but he had a 43 and a half quarterback vertical jump, 11 foot 2 inch broad jump, and a 4.37 at the quarterback position. As a big guy, Taylor Green's kind of insane. But anyways, I think that helped out Washington this year. And there's always the fact of, like, he's 22-year-old guy beating up against inferior athletes, all that, even if it is in the SEC. I think there's still skepticism, but in this draft class, like, a guy of that athletic build, like, if a team invests in him and he has opportunity there, I think he'll probably do more with it, because he's a serviceable runner. I don't think he's anything special. He's compared to, like, some of the great combine guys, but that doesn't mean that they're great NFL guys, like the Keith Marshalls of the world, the Elijah Mitchells, the Isaiah Pacheco's. That's a solid one. Pierre Strong, TJ Logan, Naheem Hines, Isaac Grendo. Those are all great testers, especially from, like, a 40 time standpoint. But again, how good are they for actual NFL production through the years? It's like, yeah, just because they're super athletic, you need to do more, because we know that guys, for example, Nick Singleton, who did not test in this class coming out of Penn State, we know that he would have also tested out pretty well, at least for, like, 40-yard dash purposes and otherwise, we would assume. But you need to do more than that to be a true NFL back.
Yeah, you guys aren't even mentioning going back to Jonah Coleman. Like, the worst thing that happened for him at the combine, it's when he compared himself to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I think it was one of the dynasty or player profiler guys who asked him a question. He's like, "Oh, who do you see yourself as? Who do you model your game after as?" And he's like, "I'm Clyde Edwards-Helaire." Like, for one game, I guess, at the Chiefs. Like, I can't think of one even block of 4 games where somebody was happy to have Clyde Edwards-Helaire on their team. And I think that's kind of maybe foretelling of what's going to be for Jonah Coleman, because he is a guy that maybe will get drafted higher than he should, and maybe in a situation that people think is, he's going to have immediate impact, and maybe that does propel him way up into the dynasty rankings and projected, where he's going to get taken in rookie drafts. But we didn't see him do anything at the combine. I'm sure he'll do something at the pro day. But yeah, it's a weird profile, and he's a big dude for being so stout, so short. So I don't know, what exactly he's going to be in the NFL. But as of right now, it's not great for Jonah Coleman. But if he does get that high draft capital, obviously he's going to get some opportunity, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire does. So whether or not he does anything with it is the other question. And then as far as Jadarian Price, I wasn't really disappointed with what he did at his combine. It wasn't great, but I don't think I expected him to be some super athlete either. Like, he is a running back, like a good between the tackles running back. He hasn't shown us any sort of, like, dynamicism that he's going to, be a every down back or anything like that. But he's certainly a guy that a team could trust, 10 to 12 carries with a game. And a lot of times that's probably only going to result in you getting like 4 or 5 fantasy points. But, on certain days he might go for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns, which is still a guy you want to have on your team, obviously. But it's not like It's not like a game breaker. You're not going to be winning leagues with Jadarian Price or anything. So I wasn't like turned off by his combine at all. I just figured it's okay. It's what it is.
Yeah, and I mostly agreed with everything that you guys said last week about Jadarian Price, but just to give listeners the context of like weighing in at 203 pounds, again for a guy who, like you said, like kind of runs in between the tackles, it's a little bit questionable, right? But I think the breakaway run rate is very high, best in the class, and ultimately with the competition that he had, like the fact that Jadarian Price was not a great, let's say, productive receiving option for them. I don't think it's a matter of he cannot do it. At least we can't rule it out that there could be some talent there because just looking at the competition, I mean, we like Aeneas Williams this next year for Notre Dame. Like he should have a pretty nice role. He's a good receiving option going back to high school, and Jeremiah Love. Absolutely a good receiving back as well at Notre Dame. So just the fact that Jadarian Price shared so much time there. Yes, that's going to nuke his production scores. I understand it for sure, but I still think he's a very solid back. And like John said, definitely in that conversation for like RB2. I've had Jonah Coleman up there as well, but until we see, maybe with that big mass of his, like we need to see maybe some evidence of explosiveness because down the stretch he definitely faded this year, but that's also partly due to injury. There's just no doubt that Jonah Coleman was banged up down the stretch. How much, did that affect him? Was it he's playing on one leg type of extreme? I don't know, but at the same time, he was not the same guy once he got hurt. That fall off was clear.
Absolutely. Now, I mentioned a sleeper last week in Eli Heidenreich. He went out and actually did fairly well at the combine as well. Now he's a little undersized. I was kind of hoping he was going to come in over the 200-pound mark, but he's not quite there. 6 foot 198, ran a 4.45. Didn't crush it in the burst and everything, but we know he might be the best receiver in receiving back in this class. Like he literally runs full on receiver routes. This is not someone who's going. We were talking about yards per route run last week, and we are like, man, Jeremiah Love's at a 1.7 or a 1.83. Like that's amazing. Jeremiah Love's so good. Jonah Coleman's at a 1.73, and Nicholas Singleton's at a 1.52, and like, oh wait, Eli Heidenreich's at a 4.73 yards per route run. He's an actual receiver in a running. Well, I don't know if you want to call him a running back's body or for a receiver's body or whatever. But hey, the combine, the NFL is treating him like a running back right now. And it's not even like one of these guys that's 250 pounds and they're saying, oh, he's a fullback or whatever. He's obviously not that. So I think if he gets drafted, it's going to either be a special teams role or he's going to get a shot at being being an actual running back or receiving back for a team. And I mean, that didn't change. Nothing changed for me with that. But if anything, it was just nice seeing him being at the combine, him running all the the drills and all that kind of stuff, showing that he actually is athletic. This isn't just him beating up on MAC conference or whatever. This is actually like he is a talented athletic running back. And so I'm just like, please begging teams, please just give him a shot.
Yeah. Of course he's gonna have 4 yards per route run at Navy. They run like three passing plays a game. So, but yeah, I mean, the same thing I said last week about Heidenreich. You just don't know because it's a weird offense they run at Navy. The numbers are going to be conflated because it's so weird what they do. Everybody knows they're running it 90% of the time, but yet somehow they're still very successful doing it, and it's because of the nature of that offense. So, um, he was a wide receiver at Navy, but a wide receiver at Navy is essentially a running back, which is why he's running with the running backs at the combine. Yeah, I don't know. I think probably special teams. I think he probably definitely earned himself a draft pick. He's going to get drafted, and he's probably going to have a spot on a roster somewhere. which is worth something, obviously. If it comes down to it, and he's the third running back on a team, there's definitely a chance that he sees meaningful playing time, depending on what the situation is. But for me, like anything more than like a fourth round rookie pick in this draft would be just a little bit crazy for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not a huge fan either. I mean, I shouldn't say I'm not even a huge fan. Like I'm okay with him, right? I think there's definitely some intrigue with the profile, but again, it doesn't profile as an every down type of back or anybody that we should be thinking becomes some sort of workhorse. Speaking of potential workhorses, Jeremiah Love. Let's give the guy a little bit of love. Absolutely, as the clear RB1 in the class, he went out there and he just backed it up. I mean, he weighed in at 212 pounds. I don't care if he's like, yeah, I want to stay light or I want to get lighter from that. NFL teams are going to say, hey, let's try to get you around this weight. He's going to be able to put on more mass, more muscle in an NFL training room. And so at the end of the day, he is what they want today in the NFL at the running back position. You just go through the list of guys that have succeeded at 210 or less pounds, and year after year, there's always guys who are up there in the fantasy ranks who do that. Like you just don't have to be huge to be a fantasy star. And so you can even go back to the years of like CJ2K and Charles and Ray Rice and Doug Martin and MJD, and even more recent years, Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Kyron Williams. Like I don't care. Like the Gibbs A chains of the world, Jeremiah Love is going to be next up with definitely being a stud with the versatility he brings, and again backed it up with the explosive testing 4.37 or 4.36 time in the 40, one of the best marks in the class. Plus, obviously, like the size adjusted athleticism and even running some of the drills, like he just kind of did what he needed to do there and thankfully avoided getting hurt because there was one play where he like slipped at the very end, right? And it looked a little bit sketchy, but I think he's just fine.
Yeah, it seemed like it. That was scary watching it live. It was like he was trying to avoid the cameraman, and then next thing you know, he slips, and everyone just goes. Even the announcers, everyone took a deep breath, and then he starts smiling, and everyone's like, "Okay, thank God."
It reminded me of when Reggie Bush tore his ACL. I think he was playing on either for the 49ers or against the 49ers. The same he tripped out, he slipped on that tarp on the side of the field and just tore his ACL. And I was like, "Oh God, please don't let that happen." It's literally the last drill he ran that day. But yeah, he seemed fine, thankfully.
Yeah, imagine in this class, you're like, all right, there's one running back that's saving the class, and then he tears his ACL the day, like at the combine, like a month before the draft. Like, no, 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 please don't do that. But
Yeah, please don't even like do his pro day. Like you're done, Jeremiah Love. You're locked in. You're good,
oh,
buddy.
I,
Don't
I
don't
think he
risk it.
did say he was done.
Okay,
I think he
good.
said that on TV, like yeah, on camera. Like I'm done. I've proven everything I need to prove. So yes, I agree. Just do normal, regular workouts and everything. Unfortunately for us, it's not a great running back class. I really don't think there was anyone else that did anything amazing that we can say, hey, this guy's got to be. The only thing I will say is Aaron talked about Seth McGowan, and he ran a 4.49 at 223 pounds, and his vertical was 42.5 and his broad jump was 10.11, which is the highest of anyone in this class for both. So that gives him a crazy burst score. So at 6 foot 223, you have an insane burst score, and you have decent big time run rate stuff like that. I have not been the biggest Seth McGowan fan. I really have kind of dismissed him in the entire process. But I guess if there was anyone that I would say is kind of like come out from nowhere to where now I would maybe consider them in like the fourth or fifth round or something like that, a rookie draft, it would probably be McGowan.
Yeah, I mean, he was a former four-star recruit too at Oklahoma, and did he's got a little bit of a shady past with some criminal things and of that nature, which I guess we don't need to get into here, obviously. But yeah, he kind of missed what like 3 seasons, and then came back with New Mexico State, did pretty well there, and then transferred to Kentucky last year, scored 12 touchdowns. The big time run rate at Kentucky wasn't very good, and that's obviously his most recent season. That's where I'm kind of held up on him. If he kind of continued what he was doing while he was at New Mexico State, that'd be something. But yeah, it really fell off a table last year at Kentucky. Same thing with like his receiving numbers. He really took a dive. So
Hmm.
the athletic testing was great. I just, like we keep going back to, I don't, take that into too much of an account because what he did while he was in the SEC was not very exciting.
No, I agree. I mean, he moved up. I wish I'd actually written it down, but I think he moved up 6 spots for me with the athletic testing. Not into a tier that I'm excited about. Like I said, I'm still talking about a fourth or fifth round rookie pick. I'm not, I'm not taking him earlier than that. But yeah, maybe at the back end of your draft. But I think that's it for the running backs. But we have quite a few wide receivers we need to talk about here, and not that much time to do it in. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? We actually had 25 wide receivers run faster than a 4.5 40 in this class. And like I said, 20 of the 50 wide receivers that were there did not run a 40 time. So, we didn't even get the full class or anything like that. But yet we still got a solid 25 wide receivers running faster than a 4.5. And in fact, we had 11 wide receivers run faster than a 4.4. I mean, we're just Brennan Thompson, Xavier Thomas, Jeff Caldwell, Bryce Lance, Zachariah Branch, Eric Rivers, Dejon Stribling, Malik Benson, Chris Brazell the second, Caleb Douglas, are all of your 4.39 or faster players, and Brennan Thompson was at 4.26, one of the fastest players ever in the combine. We'll get into him here in a little bit, but there was a lot of speed in this wide receiver class, and I think it kind of revived people's excitement in the class. We already knew the wide receivers were the belle of the ball here and all that kind of stuff, but then you start seeing like immense speed, some of the best speed that we've ever seen in a wide receiver class. Does that make you even more excited, or are you pumping the brakes for us?
I mean, we can be cautiously optimistic and excited, and still, acknowledge that these guys were running really, really fast, and there's some surprises for sure. There are the guys who did like a solid job, the Jeremy Bernards of the world. They did not blow anybody away at the combine, but they did what they needed to do. So they did a solid job. I honestly think that one guy who, I mean, we like. He's been a common sleeper, and people are actually figuring out who he is now. Like Omar Cooper Jr., like tested out pretty well. Like he had a very solid combine. He's moving up into everybody's like, oh, he could be a top three guy, top four guy in this class. We've liked him for a while, maybe not quite that high, but we still like him, and he did nothing to disappoint necessarily. And then you look at like some of the 40-yard times. I mean, like you just laid out, a ton of guys tested out fast, and you got tall guys doing it too. Like the Brennan Thompsons, like yes, we know he's a track star going back to high school, but I mean, you got guys like Jeff Caldwell at 6'5", running 4.31, or you got Chris Brazell out of Tennessee running a 4.37, and he's a huge guy. And you go down the list again, just some pretty good testing. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited from these results, but again, go back and listen to the intro of the show. It's like we're not trying to overreact, but it will drive up draft capital, and that's why I think Daniel Jeremiah was like pretty high on this draft class as far as like a lot of guys going fairly early on day 1 and 2 within this wide receiver group. He must have had some knowledge of these guys were going to test well for some reason, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, very fast times. I think the one that maybe we haven't really talked about him because Bryce Lance played for North Dakota State. He's FCS product. He's a guy that if he was transferring up into FBS this time right now this year, he would be firmly in the conversation for one of the top picks in supplemental drafts. I would say in the top 3 to 5 rounds, let's say. And North Dakota State, although FCS program, they're kind of like the cream of the crop of the FCS, and it's obviously people are going to start talking about Christian Watson, who's also a speed demon who played in the Big Sky Conference. He might have also been North Dakota State if I remember correctly. Um, so he's probably going to get really good draft capital. He's had two back-to-back seasons of over 1,000 yards. His yards per route run this year was crazy at 3.58. But he's been doing it for 2 years essentially. So teams are going to like that. And I don't think that there's anything right now that I can say other than him being from the FCS that would tell me that he couldn't be successful in the NFL. You know, Christian Watson has obviously had some injuries, but he's shown that he could be successful in the NFL at times. Other times not so much. But Bryce Lance is a guy that probably is going to start flying up draft boards, both for both the NFL and in Dynasty. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those guys because of this combine who increases his visibility and ends up being in the conversation for a first round rookie pick in Dynasty drafts once it's all said and done.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to get pushed up. We've seen a lot of excitement for him on the timeline since since he ran that 4.34. I think and obviously everyone's saying he's Christian Watson 2.0. And it's really easy to make that comparison. Obviously, same school, same everything, similar sizes. They're both fast, all that kind of stuff. I don't even know if he's necessarily Christian Watson. I can't say that I'm overly excited about him. In fact, like maybe it's the class, but I remember Christian Watson. That's not true. The draft capital is substantially lower right now. Maybe he's going to end up being drafted higher, and because of that, he'll move up some spots. But I want to say that Christian Watson was in my uh, like top 15 of wide receivers in his class, and we can't say that about Lance just yet, even with his great time, almost hit 120 height adjusted speed score, all that kind of stuff. The rest of the profile is just not there. So we're seeing a lot of similarities, and so I think people want to even go right to Christian Watson. Not even saying that Christian Watson's been some amazing wide receiver, but obviously there has been flashes there. So people want to go there, and so I think that's what they're doing. I don't know that I would agree with going there. Um, but I will say this class is pretty wild as far as the speed scores go. In fact, the only player that I really didn't get a speed score for that I really wanted to was Denzel Boston. And while he didn't run the 40 time or anything like that. He did the vertical jump for some reason, and he was not spectacular in that. He did the short shuttle, and he actually was one of the top five guys in the short shuttle, which I thought was interesting because obviously he's a bigger guy. He's not little, but he just looked slow out there at the combine versus compared to the other players. I still believe he's slow. Now I actually have him, and I don't do the projections myself. I find them from another website, but I actually have him projected for 104 height adjusted speed score. He's 6'3", 212 pounds, so it wouldn't take that much to get him there. But I honestly feel like he's probably even a little slower than that. I don't know if we're gonna get a 40 time for him or not and get an actual speed score, but there's like no one disappointing. Every year there's some guy that's like they did really well in college. They have these great production score. They have the great thing, and then they have like an 82 height adjusted speed score, and I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work, dude. But we have none of that in this class, so it's actually kind of like a breath of fresh air. I'm not saying overreact to it, but even Malachi Fields, who's essentially the slowest wide receiver that we saw out there, one of the slowest 40 times, but he's 6'4" and a half and 218 pounds. So even with his 4.61 40 time, he's still sitting at over 100 height adjusted speed score. So like I'm not even freaking out about it. So like there's really no one that I'm overly concerned about or can say based on their 40 time they're done. We can't like we can just go and take them out completely. There's no one like that.
Yeah, and I was pretty impressed for sure. Just seeing that speed score out of Chris Brazell, like he's gonna be an interesting guy out of Tennessee, where he can actually run some routes on like a lot of wide receivers who have come out of there. So that's definitely intriguing with some of the hands that he possesses, and again, 6'4" size, but running in the 4.3s. But he didn't do any other testing, so I mean, kind of leaves you wanting more. But I also understand it. And then you mentioned Denzel Boston. He looked just bad with like dropping balls out there and the fluidity in the ball, and some of those throwing drills. So unfortunately, not a great showing, but also not a guy that we're really into as a podcast. I know you mentioned Brennan Thompson, fastest guy there. I don't really have any hope for him, just considering I know he did some pretty good things from a production standpoint this last year, but he had such a slow start to his career in college. I know some of that is injury related, but then you look at the size too, and Brennan Thompson out of Mississippi State, he's what, 5'9", 160 some pounds. Definitely just not the most intriguing profile. And that's the only thing he did at the combine too, was that really insane 40-yard dash time.
Yeah, he showed up just to run that basically. I would say like you talk about like a disappointing 40 time. The closest thing you could say is maybe Carnell Tate. And even he runs a 4.53 at 6'2", which I don't, it's just like one of those things where like, okay, he's not a super hyper athlete or anything, but it's not like he can't run. Like he's still fast out there. So, but maybe there are people who see. I don't know what I heard. I saw somewhere that his speed score was a 90, which I don't. You guys know more about these speed scores than I do because I really don't take them into account. But
Almost a 95. Wait, no, actually, I don't have his height adjusted. So yeah, it probably is right around a 90.
yeah. So that was a little bit lower than obviously the rest of the wide receivers in this particular class. So maybe that does affect somebody's thoughts on him, and he's one of those guys that gets pushed down below like a Kenyan Sadiq. So that's one of the talk about the double-edged sword of the combine. Guys we like Carnell Tate might do something that is perceived as bad, but in reality, it's not going to affect how he performs on an NFL football field. So that's maybe a loser at the combine, but a winner is all of us because we might end up getting a little bit of a discount on him.
Right. And it's
You guys,
92 and a half height adjusted speed score once I actually added everything up, which we didn't get a 40 time for Makai Lemon, but I have his projected speed score to be a 94. So I mean, like very, very similar speed scores, obviously very different profiles, very different height and size and all that kind of stuff. But that's why I try to look at it as the height adjusted speed score. We're taking that height, we're taking that speed, and we're combining it so that we don't really necessarily have to look at who's taller, who's shorter, who's whatever, and we're just saying what are you? And Carnell Tate and Makai Lemon probably not that different when it's all said and done as far as that one metric goes.
yeah, and I would say another guy who potentially lost just from honestly not doing anything, similar to Jonah Coleman, was Tyson. Jordan Tyson coming
Yeah.
out of Arizona State, and it's not because of anything that he did. Like his measurables were actually really good. Like I have no issues with them. And like you said, he had the bench performance, which people said should be disqualified because of his form. I don't know ultimately what the letter of the law is there, but I just know that Jordan Tyson's a good receiver. Like you guys have talked about, like you have him at wide receiver one in the entire class. So to see him as a guy who's falling to like 107 or later in drafts is just insane. I don't think you're going to maybe see it consistently, but you are seeing it now in some mocks or some individual rankers' opinions. And just because some of these other guys, they saw him impress at the combine. Oh, now Omar Cooper. Oh, Casey Concepcion. He's another big riser out of Texas A&M. For some reason out of the combine. I know his measurables were good. I mean, I guess that boosts my confidence drafting KC Concepcion. But now all of a sudden, are we just putting aside everything that Tyson has done throughout his college career just because we didn't see him run? Hopefully, we get to see something at the pro day. But that I guess unfortunately he's a winner, or sorry, he's a loser by not doing anything. Nothing I guess negative to say about him per se.
Yeah, he's out of sight, out of mind, and so people are dropping him down. Maybe that's going to change. He's obviously not going to. I don't think he's going to run in a pro day or anything like that. I think he doesn't need to. obviously the teams are going to know if he's healthy or not. He just went and did someone said online, like, obviously his collarbone injury is healed because he just did 26 reps at 225 pounds, on the bench press. So, like, we don't have to worry about the collarbone injury. So now the only thing we're really truly worried about, 2 years removed, or almost 3 years removed, by the time the season starts from the ACL tear. The only thing we're truly worried about is possibly a hamstring injury. And I think he's being smart by saying, like, hey, I'm not going to go out and test and possibly re-injure this hammy, but you can still obviously you get knocked down boards and stuff like that because of it. So we'll see what happens. He's still my wide receiver one. Nothing has changed. And if anything, it was a huge surprise. Where are the film bros that were telling us that that Jordan Tyson was actually bigger than Carnell Tate? Like, where were those people? No one ever told me Jordan Tyson's bigger than Carnell Tate. I always heard about Carnell Tate's this monster and all this other stuff, and Jordan Tyson's this little baby, and yet somehow Jordan Tyson's bigger than him. Like, please make that make sense.
Well, Micaiah Lemon, he didn't do some of those testing events, but he did interviews, and people are going to drop him, and they're going to, say something about an interview score or otherwise. I don't know if I'm going to take much away from that. Obviously, the guy's trying to talk to a crowd, and his eyes are all over the place, but he might be a quirky, weird dude, but I guess I can't significantly drop him because of that. And if you're dropping him a lot because of small hands, well, you got to go back and watch him play and watch that drop rate, because it's not bad. I mean, he's not somebody who struggles with hands. So at the end of the day, I guess I'm not moving Micaiah Lemon down, but I know some people are, right? Some people are actually concerned off of what they saw from interviews.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an interview score in Beth, so I won't be adjusting Makai Lemon for that reason. We'll see if anything happens. Unfortunately, he did not test, which did concern me. Maybe he thinks he's done enough or whatever, but like, I think there's a lack of high end athleticism there, in which I've said before. People have obviously said, the opposite. I'm not. I don't know, but we'll. It did kind of concern me that, like, all these other guys are going out and running 4.3s, and Makai Lemon's not going to run at all. But one player that did kind of stand out, that we've said, at least I've said it, is like the unsexiest pick in rookie drafts, but yet it just always seems to be there, is Jeremy Bernard. And I was kind of concerned about what his athleticism was going to be, just because I keep saying it over and over. He's unsexy, he's not sexy, he's not sexy, but he's just always there. He's always done a good job for these teams, going back to his Washington days. And yet he goes out at 6'1", 206 pounds, and he runs a 4.48. He actually had the fastest three cone. Now, only six players ran a three cone, six wide receivers ran a three cone, but he actually had the fastest three cone by 2/10 of a second, almost 3/10 of a second, really. He had one of the fastest short shuttle times. He had a above average broad jump. The vertical was a little bit left to be desired, but honestly, like, he showed more athleticism at the combine than I even probably gave him credit for. Nothing changed for him in Beth. Like, he's still ranked exactly where he was before. So nothing's changed truly. Like, it's not like his speed score substantially changed or anything like that. I think it was just kind of like a nice vote of confidence of, like, this player that no one really gives credit to, like, should or does deserve to be here, maybe towards the back end of the first, early second, whatever.
Yeah, he didn't move for me either. I'm not nearly as high on Jeremy Bernard as you are. Um, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't think he's very good, if I'm being honest. When it comes to anything, yards per route run, market share, none of it's really sticking out as like elite at anything. And then he does the same thing at the combine. You're saying like he's surprised he's an athlete. He was just pretty average for me if I'm looking at that 40 time at 6'1", barely 200 pounds. It's just like, okay.
Oh, Aaron doesn't have anything for us on Jeremy. Thought he might have 2 cents to put in.
Yeah. I already mentioned him earlier. He did everything he needed to do to not drop for me, but he also didn't rise. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. I kind of had a feeling that he might drop in the process, especially when you're looking at all the speed that we were talking about. So yeah, I was I was it was a nice surprise to see that not only did he not drop, nothing changed for him. Everything's great with that. But now you had mentioned Taylor Green before. You forgot to mention he was 6'6", running 220 something pounds, running that 4.37. Did anything change from the QB combine? No one threw. No one did anything. I mean, no one like did any of the. No one did any of the testing as far as like the important testing or anything like that. So did anything change for any of the QBs for you guys? And then we'll go ahead and get out of here.
Yeah, no, it didn't change, but I think that Ty Simpson honestly impressed some evaluators or media people or whatever the case is with just how he conducted himself, some of the throwing drills, otherwise. So Ty Simpson, looking at quarterback out of Alabama, looking more and more like he could sneak into the first round in this NFL draft class. So we've talked about him. We'll talk about him again, I'm sure, at some point. But a lot of red flags within his profile. But at least he seemed to impress. He didn't seem to fall based on anything that he did or said at the combine.
Alrighty. Unfortunately, Aaron does have a hard out, so we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Hopefully, that was enough combine talk. If you need any more information, I have it all up on my website, or you can DM any one of us, and we will talk to you about any of these players or whatever you need. Aaron, you were not here last week, so why don't you give us some quick words of wisdom for overreacting or reacting to the combine, and then we will go ahead and get out of here.
Yeah, what I will say is that it's okay to overreact as far as like an excitement standpoint, be like invigorated and just refreshed, getting some more information and honestly getting some very much breakout performances from players. So let's be excited. Let's be very much looking forward to our rookie drafts, but at the same time, let's have a level head, not truly overreact. Let's just be excited for what it is, in the context of what we should take away from these testing events. So at the end of the day, hey, we saw some awesome performances, great athletes coming into this class. So hopefully that makes this class a little bit more exciting and fun, especially for our dynasty teams.
Absolutely. I'm like you said, I'm glad that people are now excited for the rookies, excited for the rookie drafts and things like that. So that's nice. Maybe it means more trades that are available now, whether it's trading for or trading away picks, whatever it might be, than you could have done a week ago or something like that. So, go try to make some moves, go see if your league is reinvigorated, and we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.